This week in fantasy movies, they thought Harold and the Purple Crayon was the box office bomb of the summer. Then we saw Borderlands steal the spotlight. Now, The Crow is getting clowned on, and the director desperately wants you to give it a chance, guys! Plus, 20 years on, and we have new drama about the Blair Witch Project. And we remember the reason for the season. Workers fighting for basic protections like the weekend and safe working conditions, and now protection from AI. Solidarity forever. It's This Week in Fantasy Movies. And if you want to see the trailers yourself before we talk about them, the playlist up here will take you through all of them and bring you right back here. First up, they've been teasing it all month, but Critical Role finally gave us the first trailer to Season 3 of The Legend of Vox Machina.
We shouldn't be here.
I never got into the actual play version of Critical Role, so I'm coming into this from an outsider's perspective.
To pull this off, we're gonna need all kinds of miracles.
So imagine my surprise when, instead of the usual murder hobo shenanigans out in the world,
We have to go to...
Hell.
that's right, to resurrect a fallen comrade, our murder hobos are going to the fiery underworld we all know and hate.
Maybe don't mock the murder man!
Coming October 3rd. Then, High Dive has a trailer for the English dub of I Parry Everything.
No matter the situation, an adventurer will raise their sword and strike down evil for those who cannot.
This anime was a solid hit last season. The protagonist only has one good skill.
I have trained every single day, and I can now parry 1,000 wooden swords.
Sorry, but I can't let you register as an adventurer.
So, shut out of his dream, he just goes around the world being OP and having no idea how powerful he really is.
The supreme strength that generations upon generations of the Clay's royal family have sought resides within this man.
So, as one of those filthy dub watchers, I'm glad I finally get to see it. First episode is out now. Then we have Howl's Moving Castle vibes with Promise of Wizard, and some trippy, glitchy city pop with a teaser for Apocalypse Hotel.
In a sea of uncertainty, only one thing is clear. Things will get worse before they get better.
In our last anime, Netflix dropped a notoriously bloody trailer for Terminator Zero.
Comply or die.
Out now. Plus, Disney gave us another trailer for Agatha All Along, coming September 18th, and Paramount dropped its first trailer for Sonic 3.
Shadow's story began a lot like your Sonic.
And it's giving us everything we've come to expect from the last couple movies. Cute fuzzies, alien invasions, jokey jokes, and Jim Carrey doing his usual thing.
I need room. But sir, I don't have the proper materials. Found some.
Coming to theaters in December.
Let's do this!
From Sky, we have a film about a perfectly normal British family who happens to be vegetarian vampires.
Is this a metaphor?
It's plain biological truth.
Psych, it's actually several metaphors. Puberty, conformity, prejudice, rebellion, and that's just what we can glean from the trailer.
We wanted to live as normal a life as possible.
Coming to UK theaters October 18th.
We rule this city from the shadow.
Then, Dark Temple Pictures brings us an occult werewolf thriller in Lord of Wolves.
This guy's half man, half wolf. It's like an old London legend.
And we have a trailer for Apartment 7A.
Being on stage isn't worth this.
I wish I could talk it up more, but this is a prime example of what happens when the studio doesn't trust what it has. Rather than leave people hanging and enticing people to actually watch the movie,
Harry, you don't even know these people.
Look, moving into my own place feels like a first step.
instead they just explain the whole plot.
All I want is to dance.
A Broadway dancer falls on hard times by twisting her ankle.
Show me. Again.
So this creepy landlady takes this girl in and tries to turn her into somebody she doesn't want to be.
Maybe I shouldn't have bought every single thing handed to you on a silver platter.
And then she gives birth to a monster.
They did ungodly things to her. And now they've chosen you.
It's pretty pedestrian stuff for us genre nerds. But whether the film is actually boring or the marketing agency just didn't understand how to target this film's audience, they decided to just lean on all the current horror movie trailer tropes set out by Hereditary. Rhythmic sound effects, strings, and soprano vocals to match the edit, creepy close-ups, strobe edits, and the occasional cello screech. Never mind if the film actually leans into any of this. I'll bet it doesn't. These tropes have worked before, and by golly, they're gonna shoehorn it in whether it makes sense or not. To be clear, a good trailer probably exists somewhere in the recesses of a server rack in LA. Something backed by a Broadway musical number that really gets the feel of the movie. But this is not that trailer. This is the safe play. The phone it in cut, if you will. I hope Apartment 7A is actually good, but if Paramount doesn't believe in its own film, then it'll be an uphill battle convincing anyone to watch it. But you know who does believe in his film? Rupert Sanders, director of the latest attempt at adapting The Crow. After the infamous production of the 1994 version, which saw Bruce Lee's son Brandon die from improper use of a prop gun, and 3 sequels, Hollywood tried for decades to remake this cult classic. It actually passed between several different different actors during its development hell. Bill Skarsgård's brother, Alexander, was previously attached until he aged out of the role. Similarly, the film churns through directors until they landed on Rupert Sanders in 2022. But Sanders wants you to know that his version of The Crow is not a remake, guys. It's its own thing. It's his own take on the 1989 comic, really. Of course, he didn't do himself any favors. For one, he made a big deal about the film not using any firing weapons, only airsoft guns and rubber or metal decoys. Which is a good thing, safety first, but it's exactly the kind of detail that primes audiences to contrast his film with the 1994 original. And then he also went out of his way to make it resonate with an audience who was 17 to 21 back in the 90s. People who would very much remember the original and would be most upset by a filmmaker doing something different. I mean, Gen X fans aren't the most upset. That crown goes to Alex Proyas, who directed the 1994 version. He went on a low-key, salty Facebook tirade the whole week leading up to the release. But between Snow White and the Huntsman, Ghost in the Shell, and now this, why does Sanders keep going out of his way to do weird takes on beloved properties? Maybe it's because that's the only kind of film the finance guys can support in this current media landscape. Talking about his next projects, Sanders tells The Hollywood Reporter that he's always looking for unique pieces that can exist in a big cinema environment, but they're hard to find outside of pre-existing intellectual property. He says he couldn't have made this movie without it being called The Crow. Ultimately, that's the Achilles heel for this movie and so many others. It's somebody else's sandbox. If studios, and like it or not, Lionsgate is a studio, could just take a chance on brand new films and ignore concerns about IP, they could let artists like Rupert Sanders do their thing and not have to tether it to the expectations of an existing fan base. But to do that, filmmakers need you, the audience, to seek out those original movies. We try to help you with that here on This Week in Fantasy Movies, but it's a two-way street here. So why not support us on Patreon to keep that mission going? Just $5 a month gets your name in the credits and early access to these episodes before they go live on Monday afternoons. We also have a Discord community where we gather up all the news stories throughout the week and workshop the ones that make sense for This Week in Fantasy Movies. Battlemage Films is a totally independent small business, so your contribution helps this team of artists actually do the work. Because the other way to pay artists is to just be a big corporation with mountains of advertising dollars, like Amazon, who just upended the TV industry's big summer tradition of holding upfronts to sell ad space. See, upfronts started back in the 60s for TV networks to get commitments from companies like car manufacturers. Lately, Amazon has been one of the big companies buying ad space, but now it also makes shows with ad space for other companies to buy. So right as Amazon prepared to launch its new season of The Rings of Power, it also pulled back on its own ad buying and put its accounts under review to say, okay, where do we actually want to spend money here? Back in 2012, General Motors used the same tactics to negotiate ad rates down with the big networks. But this was before streaming took off. No, what is unusual is Amazon doing a review like this in the middle of summer, right when everyone is buying and selling ad space. It has the effect of TV networks and other streamers not knowing whether they can bring in the money they need to actually fund all the shows they do. It's even more chaos on top of an already chaotic film and TV industry. As the streaming bubble continues to pop, networks are slashing production of new shows, which for a decade has sustained a booming workforce across the globe and enabled all the cool fantasy shows we know and love, and the ones we don't.
A gig is a gig is a gig is a gig.
Did you know you're watching the Blair Witch Project wrong? The other week, producer Mike Bonello revealed on Twitter that they actually filmed the movie on video. You know, camcorders and DV tapes. But in 1999, studios simply didn't have a process to play the video directly on theater screens, even though the technology existed. So instead, they transferred it to a 35mm negative. So, thanks to some wrangling with the original source footage, Second Sight has cobbled together a limited edition restoration box set. Manello says it finally looks the way they wanted it to look when they were editing the film. The only downside? It's locked to Region B for the UK market. Of course it's easy to be upset about that. Maybe it's because a few months back the cast condemned the film for leaving them all broke and traumatized? Probably not. These deals take a long time to work out, international rights are a patchwork at best, and the producer wants you to urge Lionsgate to make this version their main version. But the actors continuing to be broke sure doesn't help things. See, independent films like the Blair Witch Project were and continue to be heavily unregulated with little to no union protection. So when they got paid a pittance to throw themselves into this hyper-indie production, that's all they got, while the distributor used their real names and faces for a stealth marketing campaign, even pretending these actors were dead. To this day, they're still struggling to pay bills. Lionsgate has re-released and rebooted the film several times over with zero kickbacks to the stars, who improvs the whole movie and gave it the spark that makes it special. So this Labor Day, instead of demanding some new version of an old film, maybe urge Lionsgate to finally give these stars their due. This is why unions are so important and why it's awesome that back in 2023, the Writers Guild of America and the Screen Actors Guild ended their strikes, landing good contracts with the studios with wage bumps and protection protections against AI. By the way, SAG-AFTRA this year pushed a law through the California legislature to bring even bigger protections against AI, and the bill is now on Gavin Newsom's desk for him to sign. California is a leader in both tech and entertainment, so where California goes, the federal government is sure to follow. Also, the WGA West is finally rolling out direct deposits for residuals. Welcome to the 21st century. Just last month, we reported that the Teamsters and Hollywood Basic Crafts landed a new contract with the AMPTP that the unions overwhelmingly ratified. Visual effects workers for Apple TV Plus voted last month to organize under IATSE, and casting assistants have voted to organize under the Teamsters. They look to begin contract negotiations with the AMPTP soon. Meanwhile, the Animation Guild is actively in contract negotiations. The AMPTP still hasn't met the animators' demands in key areas, so they're going to need more pressure to give the animators what they need, like protections from generative AI and an end to layoffs and outsourcing. LA studios have this weird habit of hiring animation houses in Asia and Europe, who then come back around and try to hire LA workers at lower rates and without union protections. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention on Labor Day that voice actors are still on strike against major video game studios. So if you're playing that new World of Warcraft expansion that just dropped the other week, just know that you are crossing the picket line. But why don't we do the numbers? The Crow completely crashed off the box office charts after its first weekend. We film on Sunday mornings, and normally I record multiple takes to hedge my bets, but this drop was so precipitous that there's no way it places anywhere on the top 10. Also note that both Borderlands and The Crow were meant to be tentpole films for Lionsgate, so we're gonna have to keep an eye on them and hope they recover to keep making more films. Also this week, Inside Out 2 became the first animated film ever to earn $1 billion. In streaming movies, Beetlejuice got its legacy sequel bump to the #1 spot. Thanks to that and a couple VOD editions, all the other ones we've been tracking have dropped down a few spots. In series, we have a bunch of new entries like Chaos at number 6 and The Rings of Power at number 4. In quick news, it's a good thing these aren't struck companies. Finnish video game developer Remedy has teamed up with independent film producer Annapurna to co-finance and develop the Control and Alan Wake games for film and TV. Quiver has acquired a Southern Gothic revenge fantasy film titled The Devil and the Daylong Brothers that'll distribute the film early next year. European indie film studio STX is producing a Bigfoot movie, and Predator Badlands has started production in New Zealand. It stars Elle Fanning, with Dan Trachtenberg coming back to direct. Mel Brooks and Asa Butterfield have joined Ewan McGregor on the cast of the animated film The Land of Subtimes, and Rebecca Ferguson has joined the live-action cast of The Magic Faraway Tree. Tim Burton says he's not interested in making new superhero movies. He's not saying never, but he says that the environment that made Batman is way different from what we have today. Meanwhile, Quentin Tarantino says his Star Trek movie is never going to happen. In fact, it's not nearly as big of a deal as the Hollywood press made it sound like 5 to 10 years ago. All that ever existed was a script where Tarantino had a story credit. Netflix has picked up the Indian fantasy action film Buddy, a buddy cop film following a man in a coma whose soul possesses a teddy bear. Paramount is developing an adaptation of the 1970s Atlas Comics character Devilina, the sister of literal, actual Satan. The Lord of the Rings was voted the best classical film music on Classic FM for the second year running, because of course. This is the last time we're going to mention this for a good long while. Paramount's board has confirmed they're going to go ahead with their deal to be acquired by Skydance. Check our last 2 episodes for all the coverage. The BBC rightly laughed off the prudes who complained about Doctor Who's gay kiss between Ncuti Gatwa and Jonathan Groff. The BBC has also acquired the UK rights to One Piece, with 1,000 episodes now on iPlayer. NBC Universal is getting into the anime game with an adaptation of the light novel series A Wild Last Boss Appeared, coming to Japanese TV. And with the successful live-action adaptations of One Piece, Rurouni Kenshin, and Fullmetal Alchemist, don't laugh, business logic is its own thing. Crunchyroll and Sony are exploring what anime they can adapt for live action and hopefully take some of Netflix's lunch. Coming up this week, on Wednesday, we have Jessica Frost about a young woman pursued by a time traveler. Then on Thursday, it's Beetlejuice, which got a remarkably low 4-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival this weekend. On Friday, we have The Thicket, a winter western starring Peter Dinklage, and The Boy and the Heron making its streaming debut on Max. And there you have it, this week in fantasy movies. Happy Labor Day. And remember, always talk about your salary with your coworkers. Your boss doesn't like it because it reveals power imbalances and encourages us to spend more on wages, but by law, they can't fire you for talking about it. And literally just as I was editing this episode, I landed a gig to work on a film set. So if we post anything in the next 2 weeks, it'll be short updates with just the basics. We'll have more in fantasy movies later this month.